Hi and welcome back to the Fox Guide to Pike Fishing. Now in tape 1, Max and I fished across the road at Manor Lake, whereas today we're on St John's. Both day ticket waters controlled by Linear Fisheries in Oxford, so the good news is that the pike here are available to everyone. In tape 1 we considered the essentials of pike fishing. We looked at pike fishing tackle, how to cast, land and play fish effectively, and we also showed you how to unhook them safely on the bank and return them to the water. We showed you trace making and a good selection of pike baits. Now in this tape, tape 2, we'll be taking a detailed look at two widely used presentations in modern pike fishing, paternostering and ledgering. Now paternostering and ledgering both basically require the same form of bite indication. So to start this video off, I'm going to show you the type of bite indicators that Max and myself use, and to do that I've got 4 set up on the bank here. We've got a basic drop-off indicator, a pike swinger, an electronic alarm and an advanced electronic alarm. So let's start off with the drop-off indicator. The drop-arm indicator has been used for a number of years in pike fishing now, and as time goes by they're getting better and better in terms of their design, but let's look at why it's so good. Now for a start off, it clips to the bank stick, and we've got a rigid arm here which terminates in a very highly visible head, bright orange, so you can see it from quite a distance away. At the end of the head we've got a line clip. Now on this particular design, this line clip swivels round, so whichever way your line is facing, the clip will sit in the right place. And the other good thing about this particular design is that this small dial here allows you to tighten the clip up. The idea is, when the drop-off indicator is in place, is to minimise resistance to the taking fish. So by tensioning the clip or loosening it, we can achieve a situation whereby the pike only has to put slight pressure on to pull the line free and feel no resistance whatsoever. So let's just show you how that works. I'm going to take the line off this reel, put the indicator on in place and show you what happens. Now you'll notice that the indicator is sitting directly below the reel and parallel to the rod. That's very, very important. You don't want the indicator here in front of the reel, because what actually happens is that the indicator falls because the line spills off. Now you don't want it hanging down like this either, because this indicator is designed to show runs and drop back takes caused by the pike moving towards the angler, and this is where good bite indication is critical. When a pike runs away with the bait, the run is obviously enough, especially if you've got a front alarm. But when the pike moves towards you, you want an indicator that will exaggerate that take so that it's perfectly obvious a pike has picked up the bait. So let's put this indicator back into its proper position. So I'm going to put the bait runner on and wind it up, and what I'm now going to do is to switch on the front alarm like so. Now you don't have to use a front alarm with this system, provided that you are prepared to watch that bobbin at all times. Most people would use a buzzer with it because it gives you early indication that something is happening if your eyes wander off the rod. Let's just have a look now at what happens with a take. First of all, I'm going to simulate a run. So here comes Mr. Esox, and the first thing that you'll get if you use an electronic front alarm with a vibration mode, as I've got here, is a telltale bleep or two. The pike pulls on the line, pulls the clip, and the indicator drops off. Hence the term drop arm indicator. Let's see now what happens if we get a drop back take. To show you a drop back take, I'll just switch off the alarm and we'll wind the line back on the reel, set the indicator back up, line in the clip, notice the position of the indicator, switch the alarm on. Now the pike is going to run towards us. So I'm going to slacken the line off. Let's see what happens. First thing is, once again, we're getting an audible indication, and you can see that the indicator is falling. And that is a good warning of a take. I'm just going to switch the buzzer off now and make an important point. And that is that the buzzer is a secondary warning that a take is underway. If you don't use a front alarm, then you are going to have to watch these things all day like a hawk. So you can see how having a buzzer like this one not only makes life easier, but also provides you with a secondary warning. The other important thing is, if you are going to use a front alarm, if you can afford one, try to have one that has got a vibration mode facility, as this one has, because that is more sensitive to small indications caused by the pike picking up the bait, and it gives you just that bit more warning. Now, I know that was a lengthy section, but it was very important because we covered a lot of the basics of this style of indicator. And the most important thing with all of these indicators is that you've set them up properly in the first place. Once you've mastered that, then the mechanics of the take are just the same. So let's move across now to the next style, the swinger. Now, the swinger is a more advanced form of drop arm indicator because it has a weighting system which can counteract undertows, flowing water in rivers, and when you're going to fish at long range, you really do need to use a weighted drop arm style indicator because of the bow that's in your line, the wind acting against the line, and that can mean that if your indicator is not weighted, a pike could move left or right and not give much of a drop on the indicator, and therefore the potential is there to deep hook a pike. So if you're going to fish at range, or you're going to fish in undertows or on rivers, then you should use one of these swingers. Let's take a look at one now. The principle of setting the swinger up is the same as with the drop arm indicator. We've got an adjustable clip at the front, which you can use to tension the line as required. This sliding weight here is adjustable and can be used to really load the bobbin up by pushing the weight towards the head, or to slacken it off a little bit and make the indicator lighter if you're fishing, for example, at close range or on a flat, calm day. Basically, the further out you fish, the further towards the indicator head this weight should be. Let's leave it in its central position and set it up. I'll put the bait runner on. I haven't got this one on the buzzer, so we won't be pestered by that bleeping. Okay, there's the swinger in place. Open the bail arm so that the line can run freely when the pike takes the bait. Swinger's now in place. I've just swiveled the clip round there so it's in the correct position. And now let's look at what happens when we get a take. With a run, the line pulls the clip and the swinger falls. The pike moves towards us and immediately the swinger begins to fall, helped of course by this sliding weight, which is causing the indicator to fall more easily, and the further that weight is towards the head, the faster the indicator will want to fall. So the basic principle is exactly the same. Drop backs and true runs are shown in the same way. Let's move on now to the more sophisticated electronic alarms. Now, with this type of alarm, you don't need a front buzzer. What you actually require is one of these free-running front rod rests. You can see how the line sits in the groove there and is not trapped in any way, so that when the pike takes, it can run freely. The point with these indicators is that they are purpose-made for pike fishing, and provided you set them up properly, they provide superb bite indication. So let's start with our electronic indicator, and the first thing to note is that it must be clipped into the correct place on the rod rest. And to enable you to do this, there are two clips on the back of the indicator so that you can move it up and down on the rod rest so that it sits in exactly the right position. Let's set it up in the correct position. Again, I can tension the clip at the front to deal maybe with a current or an undertow, making it just tight enough to grip the line so that it can come free with minimal pressure from the pike. Now, again, the key point with these is that you must set them up in the correct position, which is directly underneath the reel. Very, very important. And that is where your indicator should rest. Let's switch it on now and see what happens. I'm going to switch the indicator on at the back. First of all, I'm going to open the bail arm, like so. Note the position of the indicator head. Pull a line and watch the indicator head. It falls very freely. It makes this loud, ear-piercing noise. This part of the indicator also illuminates, which is very useful for after dark fishing and low light, and I'm going to switch that off because that is the sort of noise that could not only wake the dead, it might even rouse Max Cottis during his afternoon nap. Let's see now what happens with a drop back take, because I think you can see the principle unfolding here before our very eyes. Okay, now this one works on a similar principle. You'll notice first of all that this particular indicator has got two differences, and I'm just going to turn it towards you to show you. First of all, it's got a reasonably long cable, and secondly, it's got an illuminating LED on the buzzer itself. Finally, and there is a third difference, it's a volume control, so you can have it as loud or as quiet as you like. Let me just show you the importance of putting the wire in the correct position. It's very important that if you want this indicator head to sit in the right position, that you put this wire neatly coiled around the stem of your bank stick using this special clip. And there are several of these to fit bank sticks and something else we'll show you in a moment, sold with the indicator. That is now clipped in position, and you can see that we're using quite a short lead. Let's now clip the indicator up and see how it works. Once again, we've got an adjustable clip, and I'm going to use the back rod rest to make sure that the indicator head sits in the right position. Now you can see what I've done there. I've coiled the wire around the stem of the bank stick and clipped it so that the indicator head will sit horizontal with the reel. It's very important, just as in the previous example. So what I'm going to do now is to set this indicator properly by putting the line into the clip, winding the indicator up so it sits literally right below the reel. Open the bail arm again, and now I'm going to switch the indicator on. Now this is a good position for you to view this from, because we'll see now what happens when the pike makes a run. The bobbin drops away, the indicator head lights up, and the LED on the indicator lights up too. Now there's something else that's very important, because if that ear-piercing sound is irritating you as much as it's irritating me, then what you get with this indicator is, when you pick the rod up to strike the run, it switches itself off. Very neat, very tidy. Let's just illustrate the drop back take with this one. So let's clip it up again, get it up to its horizontal position just below the reel, switch on and simulate a drop back run. The line slackens and the same thing happens again. So a wonderful piece of kit, and along with the other indicators that I've shown you, very, very effective for showing pike runs and dropbacks. But you'll notice that here I've set all of these up on bank sticks. And for some people that can be particularly annoying, especially if you're used to carp fishing, because we've got 2 bank sticks for each rod setup. There is a way of economising, and that is to use a pod. And up until recently, it wasn't possible to fish these styles of indicators on pods. But it is now, and I'm going to show you. And by the magic of television, here you have it. Pike indicators of various kinds. We've got the electronic alarm here, the basic drop-off here, fished on these Micron PS extension arms here. You can see how neatly the indicators clip onto the stems. It's a nice, neat way to fish with 2 rods on a pod. Now, enough of this theoretical stuff. What we want to see is some action. Unfortunately, Max has been in amongst the pike today here on St John's. Now, it quite often happens in pike fishing that the fish get concentrated into a small area. I'm fishing perhaps no more than 50 or 60 yards away from Max. He's getting runs, I'm not. You'll see later in this video that the situation is reversed on a session that we fished on Manor Lake. That's the way it goes sometimes, but the main point is, let's see some pike caught.
Beautiful video today.
No, don't say that.
Should probably be carpet.
They're fighting hard though, aren't they, really? For pike at this time of year, they're really going well. And, you know, they get their heads down into this weed that's still there, which is causing problems with the presentation. And when you put the hook into them initially, they feel like really big fish, and because they pull back, they're a bit confusing at first. Hey, that's what we want.
He wants to be a star.
Hey. Lovely jubbly.
Flying out, but
Is there?
we'll get the fogs in that.
All right. Lovely, lively fish. I think we should emphasise here again that
The reason we're going to do this is the hook out.
the hook is outside the fish's mouth, and if you're experienced with pike, you can afford to take them by hand, but it's not something we recommend youngsters or anyone who's slightly nervous of pike to do. You take your chances if you do this. It's probably kinder on the pike, but there are times and places to do it.
It's a nice, she's a double.
Yeah, it's a nice fish.
It's a nice fish.
Okay.
Easy.
Right. I've got it.
I'll go and get the
Yeah, I think you should.
scales and the slings.
I'm going to keep her in the water while we do this.
Right in the scissors.
Yeah, right in the scissors. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got it.
You want to go on the shaft to match?
Yeah, I'm going to. I'm just lifting that one through.
That's it. Brilliant stuff.
Pick that one out.
Just pop her in the sling.
Yeah. We've got to be a bit careful there not to damage the pike's teeth.
Oh no.
There you go, lovely dark fish. I've got it. Okay. I think we'll do this by the water, Max, eh?
Yes.
Just drop her on. What you got there, old son? 13? 13, 7? Let's have a look at this one, Max, because it's got a lovely dark coloration. Beautiful looking fish. Look at that. Look how pronounced the spots are. They go right down to the, almost to underneath her belly, look.
She doesn't want
She
you
doesn't
looking at
want
her
me to
belly.
play with her.
No. I've heard that about the women.
There you have it, the effectiveness of ledger and paternoster rigs. Now, you've probably seen Max's armoury of rods here in his swim, and if you were down your local lake with the bailiff on the prowl, you certainly wouldn't want this many rods in front of you. But these are for legitimate purposes, demonstration purposes in fact, because what Max is going to do now is show us in turn the various ledger and paternoster rigs that we're going to use in the making of this video. So Max, can we kick off with a simple one first, which is a basic straightforward ledgering rig?
Well, Matt, well, I suppose this is a ledger rig. It's in its most basic form. It's actually really more a free line with a couple of swan shot on, but this is our mackerel rig, and it's very, very simple, as you can see. It's 18-inch trace, couple of swan shot, clipped on just to give you enough weight to tighten down to, and this little chappy here, it's a deadbait casting clip.
Yeah.
Now, as we've covered earlier, tough skin baits, eel sections, mackerel and that, you only want to nick the hooks in very lightly. And this clip here allows you to attach the bait with a loop of line to give you the support for casting, and only nick it on lightly. So what I thought we'd do, if I just show you.
Now before you do that, just a couple of points. Can we first of all recap on the rig? So what we've got here is an 18-inch wire trace, and above that you've connected it via a link swivel, presumably for changing it quickly. But why have you put those swan shot onto the wire trace, Max, rather than on the main line?
Well, I clip them actually onto the wire. It's less likely to damage than the mono.
Okay.
And you've seen earlier, I like to always be able to just unclip traces and deal with pike, you know, rather than have rods about if I want to.
Yeah.
So all my rigs are all based around having a link clip.
Yeah, that's fine.
But if I just show you how you rig a mackerel on this, I'll put that down for a second. This here's we talked about in the deadbait. I mean, probably the best pike bait there is. I mean, it's pike bait par excellence. This it's quite a small tail and very, very tough skinned. So the way we'd rig this is our semi-barbless hooks, and we'd just nick these into about 2 or 3 millimeters of skin. One there, one up there.
Using the barb point.
Using the barb point. Now, as you can see, they're just very lightly touched in there.
A silly question, obviously, but why have you nicked them as lightly as that, Max?
Well, being a very tough skin bait, if you are not able to strike the bait off, and the pike thrashes its head around, if you've got 5 or 6 ounces of mackerel attached to the hooks, and it throws its head to one side, there's a fair chance if the mackerel can't come out, it's going to take the hooks with it. It won't come off the hook. So
the bait will actually leave the hooks out.
That's correct.
And I can provide testimony to that because it's actually happened to me.
Right, now that will cut out lovely, but obviously that won't take the weight of casting. So what we need to do now, as I've said, is to put a loop of line into the tail. Now, I've made a loop up here. Now the thing that you must remember is the loop must be shorter than the overall length of your trace. Now this loop, what we'll do, we'll just put our needle through the root of the tail, making sure you don't go through your finger. And this is one of these little lip needles, which is nice, because you can put the loop in there.
Draw it through.
Yeah. And we'll draw it through like that. And if I put my hands through the loop and get hold of the end of the loop and pull it through,
You're lassoing it.
Lassoed it. So now you can see that's holding on like that. Now all we do to cast out is we hook the loop over our little deadbait casting clip like so. And you see that's let the trace go slack, so there's no weight on the hooks.
And the line absorbs the force of the cast. What happens when it hits the water?
Right, well when it hits the water, as we'll do a quick demo hitting the unhooking mat, it'll go down, hit the water like so.
And it falls away.
And it falls away. Now you can see your mackerel is attached purely by the little bits of skin. And you just strike them off when you got to run.
Lovely jubbly. Now you can use the same rig without the casting clip for softer baits like herrings and you know, those sort of things. But with really soft baits, just to point things like sardines, that casting clip's very useful again, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, again, I mean, sardines, you can put a loop through the eye sockets of a sardine and do the same. One little thing again, I know we touched on it yesterday, but as with all mackerel tails, just literally clip off like that. What that actually stops is doing is stops the bait spinning in the air like a propeller.
Yeah.
And that will now cast nice and true. And the pike don't mind, they don't go around looking for tails.
No. Okay, well that's lovely. Let me get this one out of your way for you, because that was superbly demonstrated, while you get the next rod. And what we're going to move on to now is a couple of paternostering rigs, I believe.
Yeah, I'll stick this
So, show us first of all, Max, the basic paternoster setup that we've been using, because I think this one's an absolute killer. We've caught loads and loads of fish on it. It doesn't tangle up, and altogether it's the neatest paternoster design that I've seen. It's super, this.
A paternoster, I mean, really is just a way of presenting a bait off of the bottom. You know, when you've got weed and maybe snags and things, you want to keep the bait free. Really more, I mean, I prefer paternosters with live baits. Can be very effective with deads as well though, anywhere where you've got weed.
Yeah.
Now, really it's quite straightforward. And one thing I must say at this point is you never ever use a paternoster without an up trace.
Yeah.
And the up trace actually stops the bait, if you're in a live bait situation, swimming up and getting near the main line, because if the bait had swum up and a pike had then hit it and got the main line caught in its mouth and there wasn't wire there, it would then cut through the line, bite through, and you'd end up with a pike that had a set of hooks in it that would deep hook and would inevitably die.
Absolutely.
Right.
So always use an up trace.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a look at the rig in a little bit more detail then, Max.
Well, actually there's two paternosters we're going to show. This first one is a fixed paternoster. Now, the reason I mention that is that in the early part of the season, when the pike are sort of charging about and very brave and that, they don't tend to sort of worry about resistance so much. As the winter goes on, they become more finicky and they've been fished for more. They're more likely to drop baits. You then need to really change to a running paternoster where they can hit a bait and not feel any resistance.
Sure.
Now, this is actually on a helicopter up trace. And the beauty about this, if you can hold that for me, that's the bomb tail and there's the trace. As you can see, this allows the bait to swim round. Now, I know a lot of people that you've used paternosters have experienced tangles. And it's something that I did, you know, I looked at for many years, always trying to find the ultimate solution. And I must say that this, I think, was the closest I've ever found.
Yeah.
And if I whirl this around, taking care not to sort of catch myself in the face, you'll see that as the bait spins round, like the carp principle on the rig,
with a helicopter rig,
that's it, the trace on the up trace can spin round, doesn't allow the bait to actually tangle.
Yeah, well, I can provide testimony to that because I've been using these for about 8 or 9 months now.
Yeah.
And the number of tangles I've experienced is dramatically reduced. But I think to show this rig more easily, can we start at the float?
Right, we're starting from the top again, Matt. This is a sunk float.
Yeah.
Now, this has been designed to plug on to the swivel, and it doesn't actually require a bead and stop knot above it.
No, it's good. It's semi-fixed, isn't it?
Yeah,
it just slides over.
The reason that this was designed like this was if a fish charges through a weed bed, if that's fixed solid, that can actually help as a lever and help the fish, you know, pull the hooks free.
Yeah.
But being attached with a little rubber plugged on the swivel, it can actually pop off.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Again, back to the good old-fashioned safe lock link swivel.
Just recap for a minute. That float is threaded onto the main line.
That's correct.
And pushed over the top eye of the swivel.
Locked, yeah, locked onto the swivel.
Right. The swivel is actually a link swivel.
It's a safe lock link.
Yeah.
And again, basically, that is what you end up with on the rod.
Yeah. Okay.
And that allows me to unclip and change an up trace or change a rig in seconds.
Right. So below the link swivel, what we got now?
Below the link swivel, we've got the helicopter up trace, which is about 24 inches long.
Yeah.
Which has got the helicopter bead and the swivel that attaches the trace, the bait trace,
Yeah.
to. That plugs into a rubber, which plugs over a swivel at the bottom to which your bomb link is attached.
Okay, so let's take a look at that. We've got the helicopter rig on the up trace. The link swivel revolves around the outside containing the main trace, and the whole thing plugs onto the swivel at the bottom, again on a semi-fixed principle. And then we have the bomb tail, Max, yeah?
Now, the length of the bomb tail really is dependent on how high you wish to fish the bait off the bottom.
Right.
I mean, if you want to fish the bait very close to the bottom, you would put maybe the bomb there.
Yeah.
I've chosen to fish the bait, as you can see, some 2.5 feet off the bottom.
Because of the weed out there?
Because of the bottom weed that we've got. I mean, it's early season still, and there's still some Canadian that are hanging around from the summer.
All right. Final question, Max. Size of the bomb?
Size of the bomb, it's debatable. Personally, I like quite a heavy bomb. I know it's a fixed rig, and people will be watching and say, oh no, you know, and criticise and fixed and pike and resistance and that. I actually think at this time of the year it doesn't bother them, and the bigger lead actually helps to hold the hooks in when they take off initially.
Okay. Well, that is a matter of choice for the punters, but the one thing I would say is make sure you use a lead heavy enough to sink the sunk float, of course, otherwise the whole thing will bob round uncontrollably. So I would have thought at least 1.5 ounces would be advisable.
Anywhere between 1.5 ounces and 3 ounces.
Good. Okay, moving swiftly on. Now, you mentioned that later in the season the pike can get a little bit finicky, and you might experience drop takes on a standard paternoster rig, and that is the time to get a little bit more tricky. So can we have a look at the next paternoster variant, Max, please?
Well, Matt, here's the running version of the paternoster. So just hit the bait runner, give us a bit of line, and we'll explain this one. Put the rod down. Now, as you can see, Matt, the sunk float and the bomb tail is attached to this low resistance run ring.
Right.
So effectively, the trace with the bait on is in direct line with your main line.
Yeah.
So all the weight can now run. Now, the reason this is a low resistance ring, a wide bore ring, is because again, we've got an up trace on here.
Yeah.
Same principle, that if that's being fished like that and the bait comes up, you don't want it to be able to be chewed off.
Yeah.
Of course, to make an up trace, we've got a swivel on it, so this must have a big enough diameter to pass freely over the swivel of the trace.
Let's just recap 1 second, because it is quite a complicated rig. So you've got an up trace tied onto the main line, the free running ring running on the up trace, and it's prevented from running over the bottom link swivel by this oval bead. Okay, so let's just concentrate on what's below the run ring then.
Right, attached to our run ring, as you can see, is our sunk float, and below that is our bomb.
Right.
And if I just hold that for you, look, and show you how it would sit in the water, it would sit something like that.
Yeah.
Now, when you cast this out, you need to pull the thing down tight and then let off about 3 feet of slack and clip it up.
That is to allow the float
to rise
in the water.
Yeah, so you pull it tight and you allow enough slack to come up, which then holds the piece of line up,
Yeah.
which supports the bait.
So in fact, we're running from the float
That's
up
correct.
the line to your rod. Now your trace is here.
Everything is attached. Now everything is now like free running. So if you get a take, that can all pull through, direct on the main line. There's no resistance, and the pike hopefully will just go trundling off and won't think anything's up.
Okay.
One thing that I must just mention here that's very important is the distances. The distances between the ring and your float must be the length of your trace plus at least 6 to 8 inches. The same works back on your up trace. It needs to be the length of your main trace plus 6 to 8 inches. That's just to ensure that the bait in its area of movement cannot either get past the up trace or tangle around the float.
Sure.
Now this rig, as I've said earlier, is particularly effective towards the back end of the season or on pressured waters where pike do realise that a meal doesn't come with a resistance behind it and learn to sort of spit baits out and drop them very quickly. Very, very effective rig, and one that I hope we'll show in the video.
Let me just tidy up one thing with the float before we finish. and that is how Max has attached the float to the trace there. As he mentioned before, it's about 2.5 to 3 feet above the bomb, but it's got a bead at each end and a stop knot securing.
That's so I can vary it, Matt. I mean, I can now move that and shorten or increase the distance or decrease the distance that I'm fishing it off the bottom.
Sure. But the point is the float is actually fixed in place.
Yes, it is. It's fixed there.
Via 2 power gum stop knots. Lovely. Okay, right, Max, let's move off that one now. And I think what we'll do now with all of this heavy theory is to take some light relief, quite literally, and do some fishing, catch a couple of pike with any joy, and we'll come back and finish up on rigs. See you in a moment.
Right, when you've cast the paternoster out, just let it hit the bottom, tighten up and just pull it just to check it's all clear. Now you sink your line like so and place the rod back on the rests. Now the important thing with the pat is to allow the float to rise so that it holds the bait up off the bottom. Now you do this by letting off a coil at a time and watching it pull tight from the rod tip. Now, right, let's stop. Now when it actually starts to slow down and the loop stays slack, then just put 2 coils back on the spool, hold it, check it by pulling the line, let it go. And as you can see, it's now picking up nicely. We'll now go clip on our drop arm indicator. Now, it's just a little bit too slack, so we'll just give it another turn just to rise it up. Once you think that you've got it right, just give it a pull and the line should pull back fairly quickly and tighten up again. Your paternoster is now ready to catch your pike.
Well, now that Max has caught a nice fish, let's just home in on weighing and photographing pike. Now, as Max mentioned in the earlier tape, the first thing you'll need is a good sling. And this is the sling that he showed you with the PVC inner liner, which is big enough to accommodate even the largest pike and doesn't damage the mucus, the protective mucus on the outside of the pike's skin. Now, the fish is nicely in the sling now, it's on the scales and the weight has been taken. It's time for us to photograph it. There are 2 ways you can photograph a pike to make it look good. One way is to hold it horizontally, supporting the fish under the chin and about 2/3 of the way along its body. In other words, holding it like you would any other fish like a carp or a tench or a bream. But the other way, which is particularly effective with pike, is to again hold it under the chin, but to show the fish lengthways, with one of your hands behind its body, holding it out so that you can see all of the coloration, the head, and the absolute length of the fish, its torpedo shape to perfection. Lovely stuff. What a picture. Hot stuff indeed. Now, we've covered the semi-free line rig, we've covered 2 variations on the paternoster, but we've got 3 ledger rigs here which are a bit special. We're going to take you through them now. Max, can we start off with a basic deadbait ledger rig, if you don't mind?
Right. Now, I mean, this really, Matt, is simplicity itself.
Thank God for that, Max.
Who said cut pike rigs
I'm a
are never
simple
complicated?
person, Max. Let's keep this one simple.
This really, again, it's a ledger weight that's attached to one of my favourite low resistance rings.
Yeah.
And what I've done is I've actually sleeved the link with a rubber tube.
Yeah.
Makes it rigid, and I just like to cover all things and stop, you know, minimise the chance of it getting tangled up and that.
Sure.
My oval bead.
Yeah.
And back to my favourite safe lock link swivel.
Yeah.
That attaches the whole
Trace.
rig to the trace.
Okay.
Now, this is a basic trace, 18 inches or so in length, and a pair of size 8 semi-barbless trebles. Now this really will cover you for most deadbait fishing.
Yep.
Smelts, sardines, roach, you know, coarse natural deadbaits.
Just one thing here. Presumably, you can use the deadbait casting clip with this as well if you're using the tough skin baits.
Yes, you can do. You can attach it to the swivel of your trace.
I have the swivel,
if
sure.
if you're fishing a sardine or...
Okay, folks, let's just take a quick look at this one again. We've got the main line, the bomb, running free on the large diameter ring, oval bead, link swivel, and about an 18-inch trace. Lovely, jubbly, nice and simple, just the way I like it.
Just one point, why an 18-inch trace?
Yep.
And it's a friend of mine told me many years ago when I first started pike fishing that he'd worked out that that was the circumference of a head of a nice 30.
Right.
So if the treble was in its mouth that way, that gave enough trace for it to go round the head and not get the mono back in its mouth.
Very nice indeed. Well, let's just hope we get the chance to put his theory to practice, although a 30 is a pretty rare old beast these days. Now then, I have a suspicion that this one will be slightly more complicated.
No,
but not terribly.
Not
terribly
Not
good.
at all.
Oh, jolly good.
This really is just a variation on a theme, and it doesn't differ any more than the use of the bait popper.
Now if the other one was a standard deadbait ledger rig, am I correct in thinking this is in fact really for live baits?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now again, if you'd like to hold that for me, yeah.
Yes,
That's
indeed.
the lead. And really it only varies. You'll see that with live baits I tend to hook them length on, and I have a slightly bigger gap between the trebles. But really the main difference here is the addition of a bait popper.
Yeah.
It's a little foam ball attached with a short link of fuse wire. Some people use polystyrene. I find that it tends to come off when you cast, and can come off after you've caught a fish. The beauty of these little poppers is you can tread on them and really abuse them, and they don't seem to take in the arm.
Yes, that's very true. I've done that several times. But let's just look at what happens in practice. Again, the same terminal setup, the free running ring attached to the bomb. It slides on the main line, bead, Max's favourite link swivel and trace. But what happens in practice is that when this bomb is on the deck, the bait popper keeps the bait working off the bottom and above the weed. Yeah. And I do know, having watched you fish a couple of times, that this is a very, very effective rig for pike that have become quite wary on paternosters, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like you, Matt. A little foam ball on its bottom keeps it working.
Yes, indeed, indeed, indeed. Okay, having said the dreaded live bait phrase, let's get back onto the safe area of a slow sinking dead bait rig.
This is quite unique, and a lot of people won't have seen anything like this.
No.
I don't really think we should tell them now.
No, I think we should, Max, on the edge of my seat here.
On the edge of your seat.
I am. Or
this
on the edge
actually,
of this
as I say, is a very, very new item, and it's a buoyant bomb.
Yes.
Now, it looks a great monstrosity. That actually weighs 2 ounces, not 2 pounds as it looks like it might, but it's really a weighted foam casting weight, really. They come in 2 sizes, 1 ounce and 2 ounce. What it allows you is a sufficient casting weight to really be able to whack a dead bait at distance. But if you'd like to just sort of make your hand look like a weed bed,
this is a weed bed.
It will come down and it will settle and stay in the top couple of inches of a weed bed.
Yeah.
Now, if you then couple that with the fact that you can put a dead bait on here with either a sort of buoyant stick or a foam insert or even air injected, and then counterbalance that with a swan shot, like a carp angler's pop-up, and the whole rig will just settle and lay on top of the weed bed. Now, just one point I would like to say with this is that because it is almost neutral buoyancy, you need to treat this really like a free line rig, and that is when you're setting up bite indication, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to allow the fish to pick up and move this about and deep hook itself without you realising.
So you need sensitive bite indication.
Sensitive bite indication.
Absolutely.
But I tell you what, this is going to account for a lot of pike, a lot of waters nowadays. Really, the weed has become more of a feature on a lot of our fishing now.
It has. And it's staying later in the year. I mean, we've got it here, it's late October, we're nearly in November and the stuff's carpeted. Let's just recap then, Max. We've got, almost like the bomb setup, we've got this buoyant ledger sitting on a free running ring, and that will sink very, very slowly because it's almost neutral buoyancy. Below that, we've got the oval bead, Max's favourite link swivel, and then the 18-inch trace. And as he mentioned before, if you want a really slow sinking hook bait as well, put some air in it, put some foam in it, and use a swan shot or two just to pop it up, and the whole thing will sit nicely on top of the weed without it getting dragged in. Well, that's superb. I think now, having covered all of that complicated stuff,
I think we should prove they work.
It's time for us to catch some fish.
Put the theory into action.